Sequel 104. The 1917 Synod. BUNYORO Kingdom versus Buganda Kingdom in as far as the construction of the latest Namirembe Cathedral building was concerned. Welcome. In the year 1917, the Synod of the Uganda Diocese sat at Namirembe. And during the contribution of the delegates, the BUNYORO delegates complained that they had found the foundation stone marked Kabaka of Buganda, Kabaka Chwa II, and it was dated November 1915. The BUNYORO delegates begged to differ. According to them, the Namirembe Cathedral foundation stone was dated the 30th of June 1913 and was laid by the bishop who was still reigning then, Bishop John Jamieson Willis. Now, the BUNYORO delegates, some of them were witnesses to the laying of the foundation stone in June 1913. They could therefore not stomach the fact that that has all been rubbished. As a matter of fact, one delegate went as far as accusing the church's Mengodinary of making the cathedral construction a Buganda Kingdom affair. The BUNYORO delegates proved and laid on table the contribution of BUNYORO in terms of blocks, in terms of money, and in terms of material towards the building of the latest cathedral building. I want to remind my listeners that BUNYORO Kingdom and Buganda Kingdom by 1917 had a very long history of hostility against each other. The two kingdoms are the only ones in Uganda who are known and who have a recorded history of waging war against each other for many, many, many centuries. Therefore, this hostility between the two could even show as the delegates deliberated in 1917. But listen to what happened. The Mengodinary delegates surprised all because in reaction, they took responsibility for the laying of the foundation stone reading Sekabaka Chwa, November 1915. And they apologized instead of returning fire. Now, that disarmed the BUNYORO delegates, who therefore joined others in a unanimous show of hands in accepting the Mengodinary apology. Therefore, the Synod agreed for a second explanatory foundation stone to be laid on the cathedral building wall. And that was done. It was smaller in size. And so, for those of you who visit the cathedral, you will notice that the place where the foundation stone was laid, or where it is placed right now, there are two of them. There is a smaller and there is a bigger. The bigger, 1915. The smaller, there is no date. They made sure that they don't put a date because then it would have been very controversial. As a matter of fact, the smaller simply declares that this is a cathedral of the wall of Uganda. Those words are inscribed on that smaller stone. But I must say that that was agreed in the Synod, that the smaller second explanatory stone be inserted there. And of course, after the Synod meeting, it was. BUNYORO delegates vowed, therefore, to continue remitting their construction contributions until the cathedral was fully completed. Remember, this was a time when the First World War was ongoing. The second issue during the Synod meeting was the reduction of the delegates. In 1912, the Synod delegates were 251. By 1915, the Synod delegates had grown to 378. And as they met in 1917, the delegates were 413. So they sorted out that issue by revising the rules of how membership and delegates would be established. And therefore, a fresh electoral and representative system was agreed and adopted to become effective with the next Synod, which would be in 1919. And also, the Synod, it became biennial, every after 2 years. The third and most important deliberation centered around the creation of the chapter house. Now, the chapter house was the confidential advisory council of the bishop in matters diocesan and in matters cathedral. And they were representatives from the whole of the Uganda diocese who constituted it. But now, the constitution that established the chapter house of the cathedral was approved in 1917 Synod. The chapter formation was agreed, the constitution had been drawn up, and a committee had been appointed. According to the constitution that formed the chapter house of the Uganda Diocese Cathedral, the bishop of the diocese was to also be the dean of the cathedral. However, there would be a sub-dean, and preferably the sub-dean was to be the archdeacon of the Uganda Diocese. The chapter was also to have a chancellor of the cathedral, leave alone the chancellor of the diocese. I therefore want to quote, because these records are very well kept at the Uganda Christian University archives in Mukono. I want to quote the very minute of the constitution, or the article of the constitution that established the chapter of the Namirembe Cathedral. It says, and I quote, "Having taken advice with our archdeacons and other drivers, discreet persons, have read and explained to the clergy and laity of the church within the Diocese of Uganda in the Synod assembled on the 20th day of June 1917, and with their approval and consent do hereby create and constitute the constitution for the chapter house of the Namirembe Cathedral Church." End of quote. Now, in the constitution that established this chapter house, there was to be the dean, who would be the bishop. There were to be no more than 10 canons, and such other clergy as rural deans, a chancellor who was supposed to be duly qualified as a solicitor, and laymen not exceeding 6. It then went on to explain who the dean was, that the Lord Bishop, who could appoint a sub-dean. However, if he appointed a sub-dean, that sub-dean had to be a member, had to be a canon of the cathedral. And so, they also agreed that the cathedral chapter house should be constituted of those canons. And how would the canons be appointed? It went on to state that they were to be appointed by the bishop at his discretion from priests of at least 6 years standing. But 2 of them had to be African natives. Now, the chapter, or the cathedral chapter house, was to meet once in a quarter. And I think a quarter is 3 months. Now, there was to be a standing committee of the chapter house, and it was to be called the Cathedral Board. The Cathedral Board. It was to be an ordinary business controller of the Cathedral Church. Lastly, the vicars were supposed to be 2 or more at the cathedral, and those were to serve the Cathedral Church. But all of them, the vicars and his assistants, were not to be members of the chapter house. That is sequel 104. Very clear. The synod is over. And so, let me also end it here. May the good Lord bless us all.